I looked, "No, go ahead." He said, "No, I got this mule from so-and-so and so-and-so. He didn't come from Texas." My dad said, "Well, let's look under his tail and see if there's a J up and J down there." So the guy came around and looked, sure enough, he picked that mule's tail up and had a J up and J down on his flanks and on his, I guess you call them thighs in there. And that man was so surprised that from Texas, South Texas to North Carolina, that my dad could recognize a mule that he had raised and branded. But he did know animals real well, better than he did human beings, really. But we raised lots of mules and broke them to harness. And other horses we gent them to ride, saddle. And the Army would buy everything that we could produce and break. If we broke them to harness, we'd get almost 3 times as much for them as we did if they just came and bought them and then they broke them. So we had a way of gentling horses that were genuinely gentle. Some people still have horses that they raised from colts and they still kind of wild like. But Dad had a way about him by handling horses and mules. And in fact, I witnessed this my own self. I saw this happen. We went in a pen of horses and mules, and Dad said, this animal looks like the stock from the Nagy farm. And Nagy was, Manuel Nagy was the regular farmer, and he lived out of Delhi a little ways. And he had some horses and mares and raised colts and stuff. So Dad saw this animal, and he went over and looked, and sure enough, he had Mr. Nagy's brand on him. And that was quite a interesting situation for Mr. Nagy, because he didn't think anybody would ever recognize an animal that far distant, in other words, that many years after they were born. And he had a good eye for horses. He could tell a good horse from a bad horse by just looking at him. And at that one time, that one horse was in the pen with all the other animals, and Dad said, "I don't believe I've seen that horse, but he looks like a Nagy stock. And he's wild. He never has been gentle for anything." So we cut him and kept cutting until we got that horse cut into a little pen by itself. And all his head was up high, and he'd rear up and looked like he's going to try to jump out. And then Dad started talking to him. And he walked in that pen with his hand extended and kept holding it out and walking towards the horse and talking to him. And after a while, that horse took his nose out and just walked up and smelled of his hand. And Dad just moved his hand up and started petting him in the jaw. Horses like that. So he did something that nobody else had ever done that I had seen. A horse that had never had a rope on him, and is completely raw, out of the brush. And he walked up talking to that horse until he stood there and let him touch him. And of course, he gentled the horse, and we had a lot of people wanted to buy him because he was so gentle. But that can happen to anybody that's got a gift of handling animals like that. And Dad just had it kind of a knack where he could walk in a pen and talk to an animal and keep talking to him, messing with him until he'd stand there and let him touch him. Not many people have that. So I learned a whole lot by just watching my dad, and he was, he got his from experience. And I got mine from just watching him. I used to put a saddle on a horse and lead him around after we had him, what we call rope broke. We'd put a rope with a hackamore on, tie him to a big log or something that wasn't solid, and let him get used to having the rope stop him. He'd maybe try to run, and then he'd get to the end of the rope, and he'd just kind of turn him around, but he wouldn't jerk his neck or break it or anything. And we got horses gentle like that with the rope, and it made it much easier for us to handle them then, to put the harness on them, saddles and so forth. But that's what we learned from watching my dad work with animals like that. And we got to where, 2 or 3 of us got to where we did most of the gentling, harness and all that stuff, and wagons. You'd have a team of mules sometimes hitched a wagon, and one new mule tied, hooked up with a big old gentle mule, and made a pair out of them, and the wild mule would try to jump and jerk the wagon around. That other mule just standing still and hold everything, And we called that old mule Panson because he had a terrible big old paunch on him. And he was real good at gentling the other animals. We put him in harness. He knew what was coming because that's what we... And he learned he learned to work with them to keep them from tearing up the harness and all that. Because a lot of them would jump and kick and pitch and get out of the traces and get off out here. And the wagon tongue would be out there, and they'd be looking, crossways from it. And it took a little doing to get them gentled down and get where you could get them back in harness. But a lot of times I'd be running along beside the wagon with the team and the wild mule or horse with what we call a snub rope, and you'd run along on foot, and the horse would get to where he'd watch you, and you'd slow down, he'd slow down. And then you take the rope and lead him anywhere you wanted to with the other one following him. We broke lots of horses and mules to wagons until harness, and the government bought it and put it. The cavalry used everything that time. At that time, at that point in time, they used all the stuff that they mechanized stuff, and all was horses and mules. Very seldom did I ever see those old government trucks they built by Ford that was being used in the Army and the military. It'd always be horses and mules all around, all the time. We enjoyed it. I know that the people that came up to look at the horses and mules from the Army, the old Army generals and colonels and so forth, and they were just amazed at how the horses would react to somebody that, that can gentle them, talk to them. But we really did have a lot of money made off of horses and mules that was bought by the cavalry and the government, United States military. I don't think that we had anybody to get hurt real bad, serious injury of any kind while we were doing all that. Although we had runaways, teams that would try to run away, wagons and run up on them. They have brakes on those wagons, and you sit up there in that old seat and you got your foot on that brake. It goes back against the hind wheels, drags them, makes them drag, so they don't run off, don't run so easy. So we had a full menagerie of every kind of animal that we could use on the farm out there, and we broke them horses and broke mules, and even little donkeys, we'd break them to ride. People would buy them for a goat herder or something like that. And now then they use them a whole lot to go out in the pasture and round up the cattle. And a donkey won't let a coyote anywhere close to a herd of cows. They use them a whole lot for different reasons. The llama is also being used a whole lot now in that capacity. They won't let them don't let them get excited and have stampede. They run around in them and keep them slowed down. I haven't had the experience lately, but that's what I've been told, that they do kind of keep the animals kind of gentle down. They don't let them have a complete runaway stampede or whatever you want to call it. It's my Grandma Weatherford. She was Grandma King, and then Grandpa King died. Several years later, she married Grandpa Weatherford. I have Grandpa Weatherford's, no, it's not Grandpa Weatherford, it's Uncle Wallace's. Uncle Wallace's cane in there, in the upright in there. It was a Weatherford, it was his daddy, and Uncle Wallace wound up with it. And they came to visit us out there at Divot. Oh gosh, I was probably about 7 years old. And when they got ready to leave, I couldn't get my eyes off that walking cane. You know, and he says, "Here, would you like to use this?" And I'd grin, you know, and I wouldn't take it. And he says, "Take it, I'll give it to you." And he gave me that walking cane. I still have it. The kids, Uncle Wallace's children, I guess it'd be grandchildren that would probably like to have that. So I'm going to be sure before I die that I'll get that walking cane to the proper people, because they ought to have it. It's a kind of scrawny looking cane and a little bit crooked, got a little bow in it. But it was Grandpa Weatherford's, Uncle Wallace's, no, it was Uncle Wallace's daddy's cane, that's what it was, yeah. And I've got it in there, that's right. They're all dead except the grandchildren over in Alpine and Marfa. They're out from West Texas. Can't think of anything else about the Weatherford, but Grandma, she had a green thumb. She could take nearly anything and make it grow pretty. You had to trim it and how to water it and feed different things and fertilizer and stuff. In Austin, Grandma's home up there was 2 stories, and the front porch was just like this. You just stepped off and you're down on the porch, and then there was a street up there. But when you started going back to the back of the house, it dropped off very steep like that. So the house went on the floor, and the back part of the house was about 6 to 8 feet higher than the ground. And my grandmother fixed her what do you call it, she had flowers and vegetables and stuff growing in under that back. Well, the sun came in because it was, you know, facing north, and the sun shone in from the south. And she had that beautiful bunch of plants and flowers and stuff, and she really had a green thumb. But she's in this picture, she's got a sprinkler. She's been watering stuff. I can't recognize anything in this picture, but she was great with flowers and stuff. Well, we always look forward to Christmas, because years ago, my dad would put us all in that Model T Ford and head for Austin. We'd go visit Grandma. And of course, it wasn't anything, San Antonio wasn't anything like it is now. We went through San Antonio and took that old Austin Highway. And I remember one time we were going up there, and it was a Model T Ford. From the very beginning, it was a Model T Ford, It had mud and everything stuck all over it from a wall a long time. And my dad would pass it, and then after a while he'd catch up with us, and then he'd pass us. And Dad named that old Model T Ford Dirty Dalton. He said, "Here comes old Dirty Dalton. He's going to pass us again," and so forth. We had that old car on the road in front and behind us all the way to Austin. We'd be surprised to know that somebody would be going the same way we were and stay almost with us nearly all the way. I think it was two men. It was one man and two women. Three women and one man. I can't remember what all was in the car, but it was a Ford touring car. Had a canvas top photo, and it had curtains that you could put up. And we drove all the way from, you might say, Pearsall up to Austin, Texas, with that old Model T Ford. He'd be behind us a little ways, and then he'd be in front of us, and Dad called, "Well, here comes old Dirty Dalton." Dirty Dalton, and we'd all look, and we'd know the car, because he named it. And there's two men in it. I have no idea who they were or what they did. But we enjoyed having something to look at, all the way up there. Followed us all the way. Be in front of us a while and then behind us a while. But Dad was real proud. He had that Model T Ford, 4-door sedan. Had glasses that you cranked up or pulled up. There's a strap to pull them up and then come down and put it over the pin. You stop that window anywhere you wanted to. And the windshield, of course, in front was like all of them. You'd open it out, close it. And we drove and we'd ride in that old Model T Ford, all 7 of us. Of course, it'd be 9 with Mom and Papa both, I can probably remember back when we first started going, that I could remember was maybe not any, probably, let's see, that was Jewel, May, Tiny, and me, and Merle. I can remember that bunch being up there and back, and Patty was the next one born, and she was tiny, just a little baby. But we'd go all the way from Divot to Austin in that Model T Ford. And I don't think we ever stopped and put gasoline in it, because they really did. They really drove a long way on a gallon of gasoline. I imagine they made somewhere around 15 to 16 miles to a gallon gasoline. Model T. They had the old spark plugs. Just look at the butterflies going through here. You see them flying real low. I never saw butterflies flying that low in such a big drove before. I watched them yesterday or this day before, and they'd be flying through that fence there and be under that bottom cable. Come out on the other side and go right into that bunch of grass and weeds, and here they'd come out on the other side. Well, how they did it. Grandfather King's eyebrow. The eyebrows really did stay in the family. Honey's eyebrows were just like his. Maury's were too. And this is Grandpa Birdwell and Mama and Grandma Birdwell. I just wonder, I don't know what time, point in time in his life this was taken, but when Grandpa Birdwell quit driving herds, he worked for, I don't know if that man's name was Atkins or Atkinson. He'd cattleman. He'd run cattle along the Rio Grande and graze them on, state grass. And then he would pick a time to head north and go to, I guess, this is getting hot. I guess it was Dodge City, Kansas. But he went up the trail 2 times, all the way to Kansas City, Kansas. I guess that's where it was. Maybe Kansas City, Missouri. I don't remember which is the end of the trail for him, but he was a drover, and he, at one time, he was telling me about it. He was up there on the hill where the house is over there, and he said, I have been here, and he said how many more years before. He said, I came up through the little draws and creeks and things until we got up here to where they all went into the Todos Santos, and the Todos Santos went into the Leona River. And he said the reason a lot of times I come along here and I see this neck place in here where antelope used to run, because it was, it was like a prairie. Antelope don't like brush, they want a prairie they run on. So he said, a lot of times I have a pretty good fast horse, and I just run into a little herd of antelope, and I'd pick out a fat one, and I'd get close enough to it, and I'd just shoot him right in the back of the head, near and left. Tumble him and shoot another one right quick, and I'd have 2 there, and then I'd just go back and tie a rope on them and drag them. And I had a big outfit I put on the horse that would serve as a collar, and he'd drag those antelope up to camp, and he'd turn them over to somebody to skin out and cut up and butcher, and furnish meat for the camp. And he said, I did that day in, day out for the old man Atkinson, I believe it was. And I've heard other people talking about old man Atkinson. And Grandpa Birdwell said that one time they crossed a creek there that before we were sitting, he said it was right there. He said, I went right across, pretty close right here, on my horse. And shot and killed an antelope on this little hill here just before you get down into the creek. The antelope must be different from other animals, because they said the meat's more edible, more palatable than the other wild animals like the deer. But I thought antelope and deer were so much alike you couldn't tell the difference. Man, just look at those butterflies, how low they fly. They just fly right on the ground almost. And when they get to that grass out there, that's when it really surprised me. If they just go right into that grass. They just doggone near on the ground. They just really. Comes one out there, another one out there. There comes 2 of them. 3. Way out there they go. Fell right down on the ground.
It's a lot of them.
Yeah, that's a mystery to me. The wind is coming from the southeast. Yet those things don't change their course in no way in the world. They go in the same direction. They fly from the southwest to the northeast.